Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and I'm here to fulfill a viewer request today. A recent viewer picked up a Penn Leveling 350 at a yard sale and asked me to show how to take it apart and put it back together again. This is what an ideally a Penn 350 Leveling would look like. Very creative, and yet very much a product of many of the different pieces and parts that Penn put together. The creative part is in this torsion bar, which moves and enables the line to ride across, and as the tension continues to mount, ride back so that it spools evenly, and you can kind of see it as it's working here. Now, this reel has a particular soft spot in my heart. It was the first reel that I ever purchased new. So this reel is probably over 50 years old. This one is in nice condition. I keep it as a reminder of the reel that I basically grew up fishing with. This one is not the reel that I grew up fishing with. I can tell you I beat the reel up pretty good as a young kid, but I found this one not too long ago and cleaned it up, and I just have this one set aside now. As far as parts, so it uses a lot of the parts of the Penn 155 Beachmaster series. It uses the spool, in this case it's the 200 spool, but it'll fit the Surfmaster 200 as well as the Beachmaster spools. It uses the base from the Penn Surfmaster 200. The crossbars will fit the Penn 155. And the only thing really different is this torsion bar, and as a result the case is bigger. The case is almost the size of a Long Beach case, but it doesn't have the capacities because all of that space is taken with this. The case is not very different. The setup is not very different than the Penn 209, which also uses the smaller spool because it needs the additional space here for the Levelline mechanism. But let me go ahead and show you how to take this apart and service it. And for that, I'm going to use a reel that is completely toast. This is also a 350. As you can tell, it's got a skip to it. The problem with this one apparently is that it got pulled off of the rod. You've got a bend on the reel seat. You have a chip here on the side plate, and earlier I took it apart just to see if it was a bent spool or what was causing it, and when I opened it up, the internals of the side plate here were all broken apart. So this reel can't be repaired, but for the purposes of showing you how to rebuild one, it'll work just fine. This is a piece of gold here, believe it or not. This is the one piece that you can't get in terms of repairing a 350. So it's you can see these things on auction sites like eBay and that. They're asking $20 or $25 for this piece. But regardless, I will show you how to go ahead and take this apart and clean it up and repair it. Even though there's multiple issues with it, that just don't make it any sense for me to try and put this one back together. Okay, so we start by removing the handle. In this case, there's a set screw that holds the handle screw in place. Then we remove the handle screw. And you can tell this reel has not been cared for. And really, I bought it just as a parts reel. I knew that there were issues on here, and knew that I did have that torsion there, that torsion bar there if I ever needed it. But you can see all of the oils and greases have just kind of spilled out of this reel and coagulated. But you got a nice old handle here. Again, this reel is probably 50 years old, so they'll go into my parts tray eventually. And if I need a handle, if I need an adjuster, and you can see all the lubricants and that on the store adjuster knob are also gone. And then we're going to take this side plate off. Now again, the internals of this, other than that torsion bar for the Levelline, everything else inside of it is a Penn 155. So if you're comfortable working on the Penn Beachmaster series, of course that's the 155 side plate shares the stuff with the 160 as well, which is a shorter frame. But if you're comfortable working on that series, well, you can work on this this reel as well. The drags are the same. The drag washers are the same. The bridge is the same. The pinion sleeve is the same. They're all basically the same, with the, as I said, the exception is that this has a Levelline feature in it, which drives off of it on the side plate. Okay, we're going to take that apart. I'll just show you the damage that was on this one. So here's the damage. This piece normally would fit inside here as a the click assembly, but whenever this got hit, I'm thinking it hit on this, probably on the side rail of a boat or something, whacked it pretty good or something, caused the internal side to fracture, and at this point this reel is useless. But again, I just wanted to show you how to rebuild it. I'm not sure if the spool was knocked out of true with that or not. We can go back and look. So on this one then, there's a tooth here on this torsion bar, and there's a little mechanism here that traps the bar and acts as a click ratchet. And there we go. You can hear it kind of turning. But that's the only thing. So let's take this apart to show you what's going on underneath it. There's a double drive here that causes that to turn. You can see it here. This is the mechanism. So you have an anti-reverse dog up top here with a spring load. You have a spring-loaded clicker on this one as well, so that as the reel turns, you can see how this moves up and down to allow that click rubber to advance. So what it's doing is it's coming in here, picking up the next tooth, pushing it up, coming down, picking up the next tooth, pushing it down, and so on. And then on this one, this is holding it from flipping back. So that's what's kind of going on here as this gets worked. Okay, so let's just put that off to the side for a moment. And as you notice, I'm using a parts bucket, and I shot the spring out, so we'll go find that spring. Usually I'm better at it, but we'll go find that spring in a moment. So internally then, this is the Penn 155 gearing. So let's go ahead and take that apart. The assembly comes apart by removing the four screws on the bridge side plate. And we'll do that as we work this. Now this reel is trash. There's no way to go ahead and fix this one for fun or profit. As I mentioned, the side plate is gone, and that's pretty much a universal. If you lose the side plate, you're pretty much not going to pay the money to get a replacement side plate. It hasn't been cared for. We see that with the buildup of the grease and junk. And internally, you can see here, this is the 155 gearing assembly. Has a broken anti-reverse spring here. Put the other spring in there for the dog. So the free spool release lever, I'm sorry I said anti-reverse spring, but the free spool release lever spring is gone. But regardless, we'll just we'll pretend that it's there, because we're going to show you how to rebuild it without spending any more time or money on this particular reel. So we're going to push down on the yoke, and we're going to remove the jack, and we can take the yoke out and the two side plate screws. Your screws. Okay, so we got 4 screws here on the bridge. 2 of them are fully threaded, 2 of them are partially threaded. The partially threaded screws belong up top on the assembly because the springs ride on them like this. The 2 on the bottom are fully threaded because there's no spring transition in that. So I'm going to put those in the parts basket here. And get the piece of the broken free spool release spring out of the way. And for a servicing then, you would want to clean these pieces and parts up if you found a reel like this and it could be restored. So for that, generally I'll just use 4/0 steel wool to get rid of all of that coagulated grease and junk. And that'll just put a nice little shine and clean on it. So I like this reel. My dad actually bought it for me. Like I said, it was the first one I got new. And the whole idea there was I just wasn't old enough to really efficiently work a conventional reel. I always wound up with a big pile of the reel up top whenever a fish got on. And this one was hands-free operation, and it was an easy way to just keep cranking and paying attention to landing the fish without worrying about properly aligning the reel's line. By today's standards, a lot of the ones out there have the arm bar level line and are much easier to operate. But this one was a novelty at the time, and again, I want to say 1959, 1960, somewhere in there is when the reel was produced. And since then, it's stood the test of time, at least in my mind. So I got lucky. I just found the other spring. That's the one that popped off of the anti-reverse dog that belongs up on the click ratchet here. So we'll go install that in just a moment. Okay, so this is your bridge. It's the 155 bridge. Here's your drag assembly. So this is the traditional Penn drag assembly with the three drag washers and the 3 metal washers. And these, as you might imagine, have been compressed and are in terrible shape. And again, to me, this is not worth rebuilding, so I'm not going to go crazy here in terms of that, but you can see that they're just breaking off here at this point. So if you were to rebuild this, you would go and get some new drags. But you can see that the bottom washer, as well as the felt washers or the fabric washers in between, are shot. So the drag washers are available. Just grabbing this to see, they're available at pennparts.com, which is now Mystic Parts. And I'm going to go grab some just to show you how this works. And we'll go ahead and do this as if it was a service, just because there's work that needs to be done here. So I'm just going to grab a couple of additional washers. And usually I have a piece around here that is the back washer piece, that little one that's shattered, that keeps the spacing between the main gear and the bridge plate. Here we go. Okay, so we're a little bit in luck here. This one, I think this one's the larger. Oh, we're okay. All right, so what we would do with this then is, in rebuilding the bridge, you have a pinion gear. We probably want to take this apart, so let's go ahead and take this apart and make sure that this gets cleaned as well. And we're just looking for a pin now. These pinion sleeve gear sleeves are held on with a stop pin in the middle, so you push that pin through so that you can grab that to remove the sleeve. Pull that pin out, and then again put that in the parts basket where you know you can find it. Then this should be easily removed. It pulls off. You want to make sure that you clean any of the contaminants and grease buildup on this. So again, that 4/0 steel wool works just fine. You can see it's cleaned up nicely. You want to make sure the inside of this is clean. Sometimes that gets a little bit of grease buildup in it. So I go ahead and use a cotton swab to do that. And then we can just reinstall, simply placing that back onto the sleeve, grabbing that pin, replacing that pin by simply inserting it into the hole there, and then pressing or pushing it down. Make sure you have the clearance. With that, then I'm going to take a replacement for that one that broke. And that's one way to find out that the pin has not been pushed all the way in. I just pushed it through too much. So these have pretty tight clearances, as you might imagine. And if you don't get it just right, it is going to stick. There we go. I'm going to put the main washer on, main gear on. And then again, you saw the lineup before. We're going to have a fabric washer, round metal washer, second fabric washer. Then there's a keyed or an eared washer that belongs in the middle. Let's try to clean this up for you so you can see. It has 2 tabs on it, or 2 keys. They sit in a groove in the main gear, and it always goes in the middle. So you want to make certain that you have that aligned properly. Otherwise, your drag stack won't work. We're going to go ahead and put the last of these on, and of course I have more on here than I need. Whoops, that one broke. That's probably one of the ones that needed to be replaced. So if you go and order the replacement washers today, you're going to get a washer like this, which is sort of the HT100 set, as opposed to the older variety that you see me putting on here. Either way, they both work. They need to be flexible, and as you're seeing here, if they're not properly maintained, they're just going to snap and break and not be of any value at all. And then the last piece then is the cap washer that goes up top. Okay, so with that set then, we're going to go ahead and go back to this side plate here. What you want to do on this one, it's a moving part. You want to just make sure that it's properly oiled. You can use any oil that's designed for fishing reels. So in this case, I have a Penn Precision oil. I also have a Reelex. The Reelex oil is open, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we have a nice dose of oil around the trip lever, and I like to put a little bit behind the lever where it's sliding as well. And then what we want to do is we want to grab that other anti-reverse dog. That's the pointed one. You can see that up here. That belongs here for the anti-reverse on that torsion bar. And then back to the screw that the spring that shot out that I was fortunate enough to find. I'm going to go ahead and put that back in. And then once we do that, we're good to put that side trim ring back on to hold all of that in place so that it doesn't shoot out again. And again, this has just got a lot of crud on it, so this is more for demonstration purposes than this one's going to go fishing. It's got particularly cumbersome or difficult dried grease on it. If you have that dried grease like that, you might want to try a metal polish. And this one just needs to be opened here. So much for the prep. I go through a lot of this. Put a little bit of the metal polish on here. It's mild abrasive, and that will help with taking the grease off. It'll make it go much quicker, as you can see here. As such. So a couple of different tricks there. Use the steel wall if you need to. Use a mild metal cleaner, abrasive kind of thing. And again, there's a metal spring that belongs here for the free spool release. And again, I'm just, this reel isn't going anywhere, so I'm not going to go ahead and repair that. I really wanted to show you how to lubricate underneath here with the spool advance for the torsion bar, and I wanted to show you how to rebuild the bridge. On the way back then, what we want to do for a pop lubrication, we want to grab a little bit of blue grease. In this case, the blue grease is a Penn Precision Reel grease. Doesn't have to be Penn, but it does need to be a grease that's designed for fishing reels. And then we can go ahead and put the rest of this back. So the first thing we want to do is grab the side springs. Once we grab the springs, then we can put the yoke on. You want to put a little bit of grease on that yoke. Again, this is 155 parts. So if you have a Beachmaster out there that's not being used for anything but parts. You could certainly make them interchangeable here, and vice versa. If you wound up with a reel like this one, it's pretty much toast, but you needed a part for a Beachmaster, you could go ahead and grab these parts: the jack, the yoke, the gear, the bridge, the gearing on that. They're all 155 gears. Okay, so once that's set, then we press down on this, insert the bridge, and turn that halfway till it's pretty much perpendicular to the bottom. I'm going to grab one of the threaded bridge screws, which goes on the bottom. Then we're going to grab that anti-reverse dog, which holds the main gear and that gear sleeve from coming backwards. Then we're going to grab that other spring, which holds the anti-reverse gear in place. And there's a spring, so again, you got to be careful. In this case, I got it stuck on the sidewall there for some reason. So there's a little groove that it sits in. I just shot it again. I'm just not having any luck with that spring. I think it's a rebel. I'm just going to go grab another one for now so that we can complete this. Always good to have these extra springs around. Lord knows we need them. Okay, I'll go find that one in a minute. I know where it is, but no sense taking video time there. Okay, so that's how the spring sits inside the anti-reverse dog. And we can complete the rotation. And I just like to do just a quick turn here just to make sure that that screw gets seated before I go any further. And I don't like to tighten it down because the tolerances on these are pretty tight, and you certainly want to make sure that you have them all seated before we go much further. So now we want to take one that's partially threaded, that goes up top. And I like to do these north, south, east, west kind of way, where I make certain that there's a balance here so that I don't over torque one side or the other. Once I get that, I'm going to take the other partially threaded one up top on this side. Make sure that that grabs. And we'll go for the fourth one, which is down below here. Make sure that that one grabs. And then we can finish this off. Okay, so now you want to check to make sure it's operating smoothly, which it is. You can see that turning nicely there. And we can see that the gears here are turning as well, the teeth on these two. So I have a stationary anti-reverse ratchet here, and I have the moving one below. So when you go to put this torsion bar back in, if you have this moving one set high like this, you're not going to get it in. It's gonna be proud. What you need to do is you need to turn the reel until this one recedes down to its low point. Then you can put the torsion bar back in, and now you're properly seated. So that's the only trick on this one in terms of reel reassembly. I'm going to put a little bit of grease onto the jack where it slides in, and then what we would be able to do next is we could reinstall. So you're going to grab this, and again, this is kind of play along at this point because this reel is toast. You would want to make sure that your spools are clear on both sides. You can insert your spool at that point. And then what we want to do is you want to make sure that this side is properly seated, which it is. Hold that in place as you go and bring the rest of the reel around. Okay, and then once we have that, we can, well, it didn't come out, we came out with this, so let's go ahead and turn this around again. Okay, there we go, now we're seated. I'm going to take that off again. I'm not happy with what I'm seeing there. There we go. Now we got it again. Okay, and we can just go ahead and go do that one more time there. Line these up. Part of the problem with this is I'm working with a broken reel, so I have a frame that's a little bit off, and that's never a good thing. Okay. Then we'll come back on this one and we'll insert the side plate screws, and again you can look at the basket for this, knowing that that's where your pieces and parts are. And this reel is not going to turn well because it's got the fractured or bent reel seat. But again, for demonstration purposes, I wanted to show you there is a little bit of a difference there on the torsion bar. And there's a little bit of extra effort required in terms of seating that into the carrier. Once you get that done, you're all right. But again, all these pieces and parts are pretty much the same. From a Penn 155, 160, and Beachmaster series. Also shares the 200 parts with the Surfmaster, and just has a unique, and as I mentioned on the beginning of this video, I believe a very creative approach there in terms of the torsion bar for the Levelline. And this right now I'm kind of struggling with this because the frame is bent. But we'll go ahead and we'll put